Hello, dear audience. I'm Dre.
I'm John.
And this is Voices in the Dark, where we're learning how to human.
We are, and we are learning how to Stoic. Also, this is the next episode of the Modern Stoic series. I think it's episode 21. Just
Yes.
about keeping up with that. This time we're going to talk about letter number 32, which is called Unusually Simply on Progress, which is about staying the course, knowing how to recognize progress from how it feels, and the dangers of internalizing other people's narratives of what your life should be. I quite like this letter because it's short and I disagree with most of it, which is refreshing in a way.
Okay.
So maybe we're going to turn about and you're going to agree with all of it. I don't know.
I don't know if it's just my mind is being scattered to the wind at the moment. I might need your help to make a bit more sense of what I read, I think.
Okay, I'll tell you
Okay.
what you need to know. Yes, we are. What are we? We're a podcast, and our podcast has been getting reviews.
Yes.
So thank you.
Some cool ones, too.
Yeah, some really cool ones. I'm not going to just read them out because people have left quite wordy reviews, which is very nice. So thank you to the people who've been doing that in your various countries. We've got a bunch in the UK, and some in the US and some in Canada, and I think we still have one in the Czech Republic, which I'm very into. Still waiting for that review in Russia. You know, where are our Russia listeners? I know you're out there. I see the downloads. Give me a review in Russian, and then I'll live translate it, and you can laugh as I do so. But leaving ratings and reviews really helps with the show because when we try and get guests on, they take a look and see, do people dig this thing? Whatever,
Yeah.
It gives us a bit of momentum. Really helps.
iTunes bumps us up in the search rankings for things the more reviews we get. And so
that will be great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to people who are doing that. So we invited last time you to get in touch with questions.
Yes.
And we're not answering a question on this episode because we actually just recorded a whole episode based on
The question that we got since last time.
That's right. So if you want, in fact, to maybe inspire a whole fucking episode,
Yeah, send us in your thoughts.
your questions, it could be about Stoicism, it could be about issues in your life, the kind of social dynamics, psychology, or philosophical perspectives, the kind of stuff that you know we like to talk about. And if you feel like maybe something we've got into, you don't know how to apply that in your life, maybe you're struggling with something and think that we might be able to help, we would love to try. So hit us up. You can find us on facebook.com/vinthed, Twitter also at vinthed, Instagram at vinthed.pod. I'm becoming ever more an Instagram addict. It's really improving my toilet time, I've got to tell you. Because that's where social media happens.
In the toilet, yeah.
So that would be cool. And of course, our Patreon supporters, we love you very much. Thank you so much. For those who don't know, Patreon is a platform where you can directly support people who create things that you care about and you want to be able to consume without it just being clouded by endless irrelevant advertising. Someone made a good point I saw just earlier today that it also means that when it comes to even like YouTube advertising, and we are on YouTube now, hi, waving at the YouTube audience on our beautiful camera, you don't have to be tied down to like their content guidelines, which can be extremely weird.
Because otherwise, you can get banned from being able to serve ads. I think it happened to that PewDiePie guy when he made some remarks that some people took to be anti-Semitic when I was making a joke about anti-Semitic people, I think. But,
yeah, that's right.
Basically, he gets his money from YouTube advertising, and it just killed his revenue dead.
Yeah, so there can be bullshit like that, whereas Patreon is kind of like Kickstarter, kind of like Netflix, except you choose which shows you actually want to put a bit of money into. So we would love that if you can help us out that way. That's patreon.com/vinthed. And now, this is how they start WWE pay-per-views. It's like, and now WWE and Snickers presents Seneca Letter number 32.
Okay.
I think this is a pretty weird letter. Seneca starts by kind of asking after Lucilius and says basically he's been checking up on him
Yeah.
Remember that weird letter from a while back where it was live your life as though Epicurus is watching you? Like he's constantly there going, are you having fun yet? And Seneca, I guess, is like, are you scared enough of death yet? And then move past the fear. In this case, Seneca says he's been, asking, but he kind of likes it when he doesn't hear anything.
It makes a point of saying that he's happiest when in the knowledge that no one knows what Achilles is up to.
Like he's not being splashy, I guess, was what I took from that. But so he says, okay, so what's my concern in this letter? And he said, well, it's not, Lucilius, that I'm worried about you falling into bad company exactly, because I think you're going to stay the course. You're going to try and improve your life. But Seneca's still worried about distractions, that Lucilius might fall off the horse of his personal development. And so the quote that I picked out towards the beginning is, I'm not afraid lest they work a change in you, but I am afraid lest they may hinder your progress. And much harm is done even by one who holds you back, especially since life is so short, and we make it still shorter by our unsteadiness, by making ever fresh beginnings at life, now one and immediately another. So it seems there's a couple of things going on here. One is if you're in bad company and people kind of holding you back, that's the problem. That's going to put the brakes on things. You're distracted, you're not focused, there's so much nonsense going on. But also, life is short if we can't live it well, I think, because the real life is the life that's meaningful, and the rest is just kind of spinning in place. The kind of wasting time, which for me at least isn't the same as like having an enjoyable, relaxing time with friends, but the kind of time that you spend pursuing things which are not helpful or even enjoyable to you because of social pressure. You're nodding. I'm glad you agree.
Giving me a good explanation of the letter, so I was just listening.
Shall I continue?
Yeah, sure.
The last bit is about making endless fresh starts, and that's a problem rather than staying the course. Which, I can think of where if you're kind of a bit lost, or if you're... I've encountered quite faddish people. Sometimes I think I'm one of them, that you're like, oh, I've discovered this new thing. I'm absolutely obsessed with it. It's all about this. The paleo diet, whatever. And then like a week later, they're on to the next thing. Like, actually, Red Bull is the way forwards. But there's sort of obsessive compulsive kind of attitude that seems to run on the notion that there is going to be one thing that will change your life and fix it.
They're looking for the truth. What is the truth? That clearly there's the magic silver bullet, which tells me what is wrong with me, which is one little thing that I can fix and change, and everything will be fine. Yeah.
And unfortunately, folks, that's not true.
Nope. There is no truth.
There is no truth.
We've gone over this. There is no truth. And basically, your problem isn't the solution you're looking for. The problem is that you have a problem that you're looking for a solution for. That is the crux. And you're going to just keep looking because the problem is intrinsic to you, your personality, and how you think in most cases. And you can't solve that by changing your diet or, doing the right form of exercise. Those are all things that can help a little bit, like tiny bit, but ultimately there's no, very few things that are wrong with how we feel can be fixed by one change.
And can you break that down a bit for me? The thing you think that the biggest problem that is likely driving people to jump on these bandwagons is what?
Well, there's probably quite a few different ones, but ultimately the problem becomes, after a while, the search for the solution.
That you're obsessed with searching.
Whatever the first problem was, you've migrated into a sort of a never-ending loop of looking for the solution to your problems, thinking that there is one. And so hopping from one thing to the next, trying to figure out how to fix yourself with some sort of one-off, like, this is what's wrong with me. But when you're in that mindset is it's the mindset that's the problem. There's nothing wrong with you.
Thanks. This makes me think about a couple of episodes back when we talked about the difference between going walkabout and just endlessly trying to change your context, trying to travel to different places as though you might find yourself. And so I think there's certainly a space in which trying new things and kind of looking around to see, oh, do I like that? Or shall I go and try this painting class? Shall I take up archery?
Yeah.
You know, whatever it may be, that's fine. If it's done in a way which is like, oh, you know, I'm just having a look around rather than I need to find the answer. I'm sure there's one thing and my whole life will click into place. As soon as I discover that I was meant to be a fencing master, everything is going to... I mean, maybe sometimes that could happen in the sense that you find something which gives you a consistent practice that you enjoy, that gives you a sense of discipline, that gives you a sense of progress in your life as maybe you advance through the stages of becoming a fencer or whatever it is. But that didn't mean it was just fencing was the answer. It was that thing you found helped fulfill a number of needs that were missing in your life.
But I mean, I think the difference between someone that hops onto like, nope, it wasn't yoga, I need to look for something else. Okay, how about CrossFit? As opposed to someone goes, no, yoga is the way for life, and this is the answer. The difference is the second person has chosen that his solution is correct.
The yoga is the answer in this case, and
it's a choice.
And do you think that's good?
Good so long as you know that you are the one that made that decision, and it doesn't really matter. You could do yoga or crystal meth so long as you think and choose it to be the answer to your problems. It could be and will be.
There might be a longer shelf life with the yoga, I think.
I mean, they have each, you know, one is a nicely beneficial exercise form and the other one is a drug that could probably destroy your life. But the fact that it's the answer to your problems or your purpose is an internal decision, not an intrinsic property of that thing.
It's how you relate to it.
Yes.
It's how it strikes you. I think also a good measuring stick or litmus test for like whether this is a healthy way that you're approaching things is, can you be doing your yoga or your CrossFit and just be content knowing, you know what, this is working for me. If you feel the need to run around going, you have to do this, everyone, this is the key to everything, that's kind of an obsessive need to find a key that unlocks absolutely everything. And it's very annoying to have people telling you, you know, well, they're obsessed about their new thing and you've absolutely got to do it.
It's always fun to have a conversation with someone who's found the answers to life, the universe, and everything, and be like, yeah, no, I tried, you know, vegan diet and I hated it. Like, you know, I felt low energy or yoga or CrossFit or whatever it is. Like, no, it wasn't for me. I don't like it. It's like, and the immediate is like, oh, you weren't doing it right.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it couldn't possibly be that, you know, it's good for you, but for me, it's not the right answer.
There isn't an ultimate answer, for sure. Although I do like yoga.
Life in general isn't optimal. And in particular, we are creatures designed for adaptability, not being optimized in a specific way. So we have a digestive system that is not particularly good at digesting anything in particular, but can digest almost anything a little bit well, for example. So there's no perfect diet for humans because it assumes the human digestive system assumes that you're going to run into different kinds of foods at different times for different lengths.
Sometimes it's KFC, sometimes it's McDonald's.
Well, in modern times it is, but it's funnily enough, it's actually having a consistent diet that's probably bad for you.
Well, that's true.
Like
that's
trying to find a perfect diet is probably more harmful than you know, switching between binging and dieting, or you know, for like doing like we're made for compromise. Almost all of our biology is made for compromise.
I think when you see people like the Rock having their cheat days, although if you've seen pictures of the Rock's cheat day, it's fucking intimidating. It's like a building of pancakes. That's not just because he needs to let himself off the leash. It's actually positive. It's like suddenly hit the body that's usually in full-on super training healthy mode with a ton of sugar and carbs.
Yeah.
And then like that probably helps overall.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, that's just the example of diet. But I think it also applies to everything else that we do. Like we need to kind of move, but probably shouldn't move too much. We need to sleep, but not too much. Like there's no like, oh yeah, I need to do this and this will fix everything, because you need to do a little bit of everything at different times, continuously changing, and you'll only stop when you die.
I don't remember what it was like to sleep too much. Do you?
Sleep too much. I've done like a couple of times. Like when you sleep like 14 to 16 hours and then you feel shittier than if you'd only slept 10.
I think I'd be down with trying it again, sleeping too much. The next little bit of the quote that of the letter that I quoted and I like is, we break up life into little bits and fritter it away. To me, that bit opens up the issue of attention span and doing what I think it's Cal Newport calls deep work, where he wrote this book, which ironically I didn't finish. And it's all about getting deep into your work and completing things, in which he emphasizes, or he argues, that lots of like the most important and greatest works that have been done by humans were done by people who, whether consciously or not, essentially isolated themselves during their hours of work and just got down to it without extra distractions. And I think it's amongst his work, although other people have definitely reported this, that if you're trying to write something and you're kind of into it, and then you get a phone call, or even just you answer an email, it takes you almost 20 minutes to get back into the focus zone that you were in before. So it can seem like, oh yeah, I'll just do this email, but at least in the tests that were done, it can take a long time to get back to where you were. I don't really feel that personally. I can definitely get super distracted, but I think sometimes it's almost like a little mini mental break for me when I just quickly answer a message and then get back to it.
Yeah.
But it's slippery.
And it just sounds like the kind of thing, like, sure, maybe it works for some people, but, if it works for you, that's because you lack discipline.
Yeah, but you lack discipline if you are not able to resist the temptation to get, jump on the next thing that beeps immediately. Your phone, Slack, whatever kind of thing that pops up, because then you're constantly in this sort of I'm putting out fires situation. Like you were telling me the other day, it would be better to batch admin tasks and just be able to fire through. Okay, I'm doing my emailing now. I'm doing the responding thing now, because then it's lumped together, and it's amazing how effective you can be when you do that, rather than having to, I better do that thing now. Oh, it's reminding me of something else. Oh shit, bounce. Mm-hmm. For me, at least with work, like whatever we call work, I don't mean like doing your job necessarily, but your work that is important to you, I need some solid hours to really get in the zone to be able to write something and get it out. And I find it pretty much impossible to be in that state if, say, I'm writing and somebody innocently enough in the same room asks me a question. And then, I might as well have not started. Or even the sense that I might be asked a question. Or it's kind of okay if it's like a text message that I can ignore or glance at, but if it requires my active engagement at that time, I just fucking pack up and go home. It's difficult. And obviously in a world of social media, that's ever more. So in terms of like breaking life up into little bits and frittering it away, I think there's something important to bear in mind, that you could have all the same elements, but what order are you going to put them in? And if you can batch these things a bit better, you're probably going to get more out of them. You're probably going to enjoy your dinner more if you eat it in one sitting than if you have one mouthful and then you go and play tennis and have another mouthful, or you have the phone call. And so I'm not saying it has to be all, only one thing, or you can't do all of the things, but what order are you going to do them in? Which I don't think is what Seneca was saying, but most of this letter it gave me some thoughts whilst I wasn't necessarily agreeing with him.
Well, what do you disagree on? Because so far I haven't seen you go, this is wrong.
I think it's coming up. I feel like I've got my brain fog going on today, so I hope I'm sounding reasonably coherent. I think it's more that I've taken the pieces of the letter, and it's quite a short letter, that have led me to think some things that I thought were worth talking about and sharing, rather than being super into the letter, because the letter itself seemed to me mostly Seneca saying, you just focus on your thing, Achilles, just focus on it and work harder on it, and it's the only thing that's important, and if you do that, you can look forward to a happy death. And we've kind of done that theme to death because it's one of Seneca's favorites, and I didn't feel the need to talk about it all over again, so it's more I'm sort of picking out the bits that gave me some thoughts.
Okay.
The next bit was, hasten ahead then, dearest Lucilius, and reflect how greatly you would quicken your speed if an enemy were at your back. Made me think about deadlines and Rick and Morty. What is it, the line where Rick has he's joined up with the, what are they called again? Not the Avengers, the...
Oh, shit, I forgot.
Oh, we're bad Rick and Morty fans, everybody. Sorry. Basically, whilst drunk, Rick not only went and managed to kill World Destroyer and string him up single-handedly, and then created this like dungeon of traps just for revenge against his apparent teammates. And they're like, what? How did you do this? He's like, yeah, well, to be honest, I've always thought that a competent person could knock out in a few hours the thing that takes you about a year to do. And in many ways, that's true. And I think we find that in our own lives, where something apparently on paper takes a year, and then you put it off, and then you do it in the week before it's due, which maybe isn't the best way to do it, but it certainly shows you something about the power of the concentrated effort, which is not what Seneca's talking about. So this, I guess, is where I disagree, because he's like, you should be constantly hastening towards doing what you need to do on your mission to be ready for death. What I'm interested in is just the notion of, if you have the deadline or the enemy at your back, it's interesting to note how much more you can manage to do. So it's reminded me of a quote from the musician Duke Ellington. I don't need time. What I need is a deadline. And certainly true for me. It doesn't mean I'm going to love the deadline, but the sort of shapeless space of, it needs to be finished around then, so on. It doesn't create the focus and sense of urgency to actually complete it and have it ready.
No.
It seems like it's quite an important part of the human condition.
Yeah, it's hard to engineer, and it's kind of like... it just reminded me of, I think it was when Bruce Lee got attacked by an entire studio of martial artists that were like angry that he was giving the Chinese kung fu secrets to Westerners. Mm-hmm. And he kicked their ass, but he was very unhappy because he did get like injured a bit, I think, but also it just took him too long. And like, he wasted energy, and he could have lost, because what he needed to do was strike with precision and be deadly. Whereas, the fact that he beat them, but it took forever, it looked impressive maybe if it was a movie. If it had been a movie, like, oh, cool, a good fight scene. But actually, the best fight scene in real life is one where it only lasts half a second, because you...
One punch, done.
Yeah. And I think that kind of applies to everything we do. It should take the least amount of time possible. Everything you do should have the equivalent of a killing punch. Whereas, like striking like for half an hour, because you're just throwing tiny little kind of hits until the enemy just dies of exhaustion, isn't the best way of doing it.
So what are the ways, I wonder, that we can manage to have that focus? I mean, we can set ourselves artificial deadlines, or Seneca would have us, like, his idea of the enemy at our back is the fact that death is coming. But Okay, so Seneca is clearly not advising that we live in a constant terror of death and need to finish everything before it, as you know we've gone into many times. But I think that's a pretty hard state to get into. That sort of the positive sense of, well, my time is finite, so I must use it as best I can. That sounds better to me than death is coming. It's I need a little bit of a nuance.
I think it's getting harder and harder in modern society because the things that we do have become what we must do the whole time. Like your job, basically you end up having probably one job, maybe one hobby. Mm-hmm. That's about as much as you can have in your life. Whereas the ancients had a very much more varied lifestyle. They worked 4 hours and they spent a lot of time talking, and there was long dinners and food, and there was lots of traveling involved, and it was a bit different as opposed to okay, now you have 8 hours to focus on the one thing that you need to do, and anything can expand to all of the amount of time that you have if you give it.
Absolutely.
I think you need to be in a much more fluid position, but you have to get yourself in that position, and that's hard. So if you have a 9-to-5 job, good luck. But if you're following your passion in some way, then you have to not do the Gary Vee style working 100-hour work weeks type solution. I don't think that's the right approach. I think you have to put yourself in a position where most of the time you exist in a diffused manner and you are not necessarily concentrating on your stuff. But when you do need to concentrate, you coalesce and you strike with precision and you knock things out and you do something impressive.
This is what that reminded me of the kind of state where people, if you're doing some creative work, some of the most important points are just the time where you're not doing the work, because it's gestating, it's brewing in your head, in your mind. And it's the same kind of thing that happens where you fall asleep and then you wake up with the answer to what you were wondering how to fix the night before. But that's not what bureaucrats and employers are prepared to accept. They're like, well, show me what you were doing during that time. And you're like, well, I was just sort of sitting and had a cup of tea, or I had a chat about something else. And what's funny, so I've been rewatching House, the TV show, and it's got one of those little plot devices that a lot of TV kind of mystery shows have, which is they don't know what the answer is, and then an idle conversation about something else, something is said that makes him go click, and he has the answer. Usually it's sort of a metaphor that catches him. But that's how it works.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you're walking down the street and you see a cat, and suddenly that's answered your problem about your workflow issues. It's nothing really to do with the cat. It's that you have so primed yourself to want to answer the question that your unconscious mind is looking for anything that can sort of be fitted into that template and help you.
And it must be important to remind our listeners and watchers, actually, hello,
watchers is more
that
sinister.
You are not the part that talks to you. So the reason why the cat can give you the answer is because you are your subconscious. Mm-hmm. That's who you really are, the part that isn't accessible to you very easily. And that's the best problem solver part as well. The thinky, talky part is just very, very loud, but it's actually not very good at solving problems.
No, it's
not
good
really.
at tying your laces together.
No, and have you ever watched something and suddenly you go, and you know what a solution to something is? You see someone doing something wrong, you're like, oh, they're supposed to do it that way, like a kid putting blocks the wrong way around or whatever. You're not, your mind hasn't thought in words that block must be turned 30 degrees to the right to be able to fit through that particular gap. That's not the part that solves the problem. There's an innate I know what to do, which is happening at a much lower level of cognitive process, or higher level, depending which way you look at it. And then that part gets communicated to the thinky part, which then allows you to explain it to others should you wish to. Mm-hmm. But most administrators, bureaucrats, or job positions and job roles are trying to make you use your thinky mind to solve problems.
Yeah, which is also the part that can spin lots of explanations that are not very helpful. It's not really like the stroke of genius moments are not really associated with someone having written out a long fucking formula and discovered it was right. It's more like, oh, and then you hold on to that kind of ephemeral, not quite there thing and try and pin it down into some sort of existence that can be communicated. And I've experienced that, not yet stroke of genius, exactly. But when I am trying to write something, I have an idea, it's like I can see the shadow of it, or I can see the silhouette, or I know there is a presence in the room with me in this like mental thing, but I don't know what it is yet. I just know there's something there. It's like looking at a rock and knowing that there's a statue inside it and you have to bring it out. I know it's there, but I can't tell you what it is. And God forbid anyone interrupt me when I'm trying to get that out. I can't even speak in those moments. It's caused issues sometimes with people like, you okay? I'm just like, no, can't, no. And they have to apologize later. But that's where something is trying to bubble to the surface. And you need to listen to those things, those little instincts. And maybe most of us just kind of push it away and push it down. But that's where creativity is.
Yeah. I guess it depends if you're doing things that are creative or not. If you're doing data entry, you probably don't need time alone with your thoughts thinking about shit.
Well, that's why you should be listening to podcasts at the same time to use the soul, the human soul part of yourself. Seneca next says, since you are in possession of the happy life, for such a life is not much happier for being longer. So I just clipped this out because I wasn't really agreeing with what he said. You can go, people, we'll always put a link in the show notes on voicesinthedark.world to see like the text on Wikisource, but I can't be asked rehearsing something I'm not interested in. Yeah. What interests me in this bit is this idea of, I think it might be true in one sense that your happy life is not going to become happier just by being longer. Like, does happiness compound over time, or does it kind of grow stale? Is an interesting thought, that happiness now doesn't mean happiness forever. But to be honest, I would think the opposite to what Seneca is saying, that really an unhappy life is not made happier for being longer. That stasis while sitting in shit is the enemy, rather than worrying about, the amount of happiness that you have. I think we get so easily drawn, and I feel it myself, into this it'll get better mentality, but unless we're actively making change to bring that into effect, it's unlikely to happen. That sort of the passivity of sitting there going, well, I still have time, so things might work out. Maybe if you're really lucky, but even with the lottery, you've got to buy the ticket. You've got to take some sort of action.
Yes, but I've also hurt myself in that process of trying to do that. Sometimes it's okay to let go and not take action for a while until the right kind of action presents itself to take action on. Whereas constantly trying to escape the maze when, you're virtual, like if you think of the universe as being the scientist that's like trying to see what happens if you trying to solve a maze that can't be solved, yeah. You might just need to sit down and just kind of go, okay, well, right now there's no way out.
I think that's different to just a state of total passivity. That's more like biding your time, and we know that timing and context are always super important. And you can, try and work towards making a better context for things to happen. But in the same way you need the chill out time for creativity to happen, you also need to be able to let go, as you say, not give up, like Philip McKernan draws the distinction that, you can see this on camera better, people, but one hand palm down, closed, one hand palm up, closed. Letting go, you open the hand and you allow something to breathe and be there, and you're not clutching and holding it. Giving up is where you open the hand and whatever it is that you're holding just drops to the ground, gone. That's giving up. Yeah. I really like that distinction.
Good one.
Definitely needs to be seen. Come to YouTube. But that happiness thing, there's something about it that bugs me. The idea that it's like, it seemed to me as though Seneca was saying that if you've got happiness, well, you might as well die now. Like, okay, great. Let's hope you're in a good, happy state and, you know, die doing what you loved. Fine. But it seems to be kind of putting off the possibility of having other kinds of happiness. The way that he wrote it, at least in translation, made it seem to me as though happiness is only one thing, rather than, I think there's all sorts of different kinds of happiness. Maybe it'd be useful to have different kinds of words for it on a chart or something.
It's also, when looked at correctly, a transient state.
Yeah.
Like, it's, no one is permanently happy and they've achieved happiness, and if they have, they're mentally ill or there's something wrong. Even though people chase that state.
Yeah, it's not a state or not a destination.
Yeah, it's like saying, I want to not feel thirsty ever.
Yeah.
You know, wanting to be happy forever is that kind of a thing. It's like, no, you know, you're going to get thirsty, you're going to drink.
I've taken to saying with Jamie, like, I'm happying.
Happying. Okay.
Which, you know, to some people, when you hear a couple saying that to each other, you probably want to throw up. But the reason was, when we had a conversation about this thing, was, let's not pretend like it's a state which you could imagine. If you say I'm happy and then, you know, you check in an hour later and you don't feel it, you're like, oh, I must be unhappy. No, it's like, now I am happying.
I think we should make it grammatically incorrect to be happy. Happy should be something you feel only.
Yeah, I think, was it, what's his name? The guy who wrote Prometheus Rising. It maybe come back to me. It was one of the favorite books of Eric Godsey, who we interviewed a while back. I think it was him that came up with this, like, how he'd like language to be. You probably
was it
like
the
this.
English without the verb to be?
That's right. So it would be I happying. It's just a weird artifact of the English language that you still feel the need, or it's grammatically required to say I am happying. So the to be comes in there.
And once again, because there is no truth, very little is. Like, your hair isn't blonde. My eyes perceive your hair to be of a color I think is cold blonde.
And fabulous.
Now, that is a mouthful and annoying, so we shorten it to, you have blonde hair.
Yeah.
But under different light or conditions, or, you know, or even just in time, your hair will change color throughout your lifetime. So is it true to say it is? Like, is it only in that particular moment in time that it applies a verb? Like, so then afterwards you would, if it turns white, let's say, later in life, then it wasn't it, like, is it white? Is it not long? Is it no longer blonde in the past?
Well, and to someone who say you can't see color,
right?
What is it then? There's not an atom of blondness in my hair that you can pick out.
And there's certain things that are modern in the sense, like, for example, the color blue. I think people didn't used to have a word for it.
This is the wine dark sea or something in Herodotus.
Yeah, and they call it bronze or something like that because they didn't really need to have a name for it. So there's some sort of theory around that, but they wouldn't have differentiated or called it something necessarily up until it was. And then it's just a personal decision or perception of it. Like, oh, okay, I see a color, as opposed to it, no, it doesn't have a color, because blue is not a color.
Yeah. I think there was some, I heard about anyway, I haven't seen myself, some kind of anthropological or sociological tests with colors, and that people from countries which had a name for a particular shade of orange were much more able to pick that out from like a series of tests of like, here's some similar colors. But if you're in a country where, or from a culture or a language that doesn't have a word for that thing, you're just like, well, it's kind of orangey. It doesn't really...
Yeah, and you wouldn't necessarily perceive too much of a difference between...
It's like having the eye of a master versus not.
Yeah.
That I could look at a cabinet and go, oh, it seems fine to me. Whereas a master is like, oh, I can see all of how this was put together and the ways problems have been covered up or what happened in this way. This is not a useful tangent, but people have accused me of having so many different colors of eyes that your like hair suggestion also kind of stood out to me there, that some people are like, you got blue eyes. Jamie says I've got green eyes. Other people will say kind of grey. I just kind of settled on, I think it depends what day it is and probably what colours are in the room, that there's an element of reflection going on, but they are something, a colour, which we don't have a word for. And that's why people think they're different things. What do you think?
Well, it's what I would I think I would classify them as blue. But blue eyes can appear gray or
like my soul,
take on different shades depending on what's happening, because essentially there is no color. There's no pigment
and no truth.
So what you're getting is just refraction. It's your eyes appear to be blue for the same process that the sky appears to be blue, which is light is being different wavelengths of light are being bent at different speeds, and some of it is getting trapped faster than others, and therefore blue escapes more than anything else.
So things in my eyes get bent, is what you're telling me.
Yes.
Excellent. Moving on.
Whereas people that have brown eyes, there's a pigment that is absorbing particular wavelengths of color. It's not purely an optical effect.
Okay.
So there's a difference between refraction and reflection in terms of color. So blue eyes tend to be more chameleonic. Is that a word?
Chameleon-like,
Chameleon-like. But yeah, I would say blue. It's what I would classify as blue.
Well, you and Jamie are going to have to fight it out. The next bit of the letter has nothing to do with my eyes, so I don't even know why we're going to talk about it. Oh, when shall you see the time when you shall know that time means nothing to you? When you shall be peaceful and calm, careless of the morrow because you are enjoying your life to the full. It sounds like a pretty beautiful state, a state of joy. To me, that's kind of time with friends or in the active creation of something, that when there's only now, it's a kind of eternal now when it feels that good. It's a now that extends vertically in time rather than the now that we see on like the usual horizontal timeline of past to present to future, when you don't care about tomorrow because you're totally in the present. And that's pretty special. And I don't think it's foolish either to be only focused here in this moment and not thinking about tomorrow, because tomorrow is going to happen on the basis of what happens now, the way that you're going to feel about it and go into it, and the person you're going to be at the time you get in there. It's kind of like this letter is, I picked a few things that made me think of something.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure what Seneca's particular point is, except to say to Lucilius, well, if you master your philosophical studies, you are not going to feel the pull of time. You are just going to be in the sort of Zen state of calm.
Maybe. Seems like a big assumption.
Doesn't seem like Seneca's in a Zen state of calm either, most of the time. I mean, how long is it going to be till we get to the next letter when he's like, feeling old again? I think death's coming a knocking. I think I skipped a couple of death letters before we got to this one, actually, yeah. Death.
Well, like a man at the end of his life, like he was, it must be a pretty consuming topic.
Well, it sure is. I just think it's interesting that he's someone so associated with kind of having surpassed that fear of death. But I think you said in a previous episode, it's not. He's totally obsessed with it. He's just orbiting death at all times. But, I heard Ryan Holiday talking about that too and saying, well, it's trying to find it seems to be a Stoic ideal that you are constantly orbiting death because it's true, it's coming, but that you can do it in a way which is very positive. I'm not sure if we need to be obsessively orbiting it.
No, obsessing about it is stupid. At the same time, I don't fully trust anyone that isn't terrified by it.
No, you don't trust me.
I feel like this going back to the arrogant assumption of like, if only you had the knowledge that I have, you'd think differently. But to me, it feels like understanding what it is to exist should give you an abhorrence to not being. And it's sort of like a level of awareness of your own consciousness. If you can perceive what it is to be conscious, you would see that ending is not good. Like, that's kind of how my mind thinks about it.
Okay, let's go down the rabbit hole here. I think part of the problem for humans, and in particular for me, is something I've been thinking about quite a lot, is the difficulty and perhaps almost the impossibility of, when you are in one mental or emotional state, being able to accurately imagine and think real a different emotional or mental state. When you're feeling horribly depressed or down and like life has no meaning, it is very difficult to imagine how you were able to be in a different state. What was that like? It's like a memory. It's like a diary entry you read back and you're like, was that really me? I don't understand. I'm not that person anymore. It's like you've changed into a whole different state. It's like a phase shift. And I think and that's why it's so thrilling and wonderful when you are re-entering a positive state. You're like, oh, I remember what it was like to be alive. This is amazing. Maybe you go for a walk up a mountain or something in nature, or you hang out with an old friend you haven't seen for a while, and you're like, oh yeah, this. And I think it's also like the psychedelic state. I don't think that we can really remember what it's like to be in it when we're not in it. When we go back into it, there's that, oh yeah, this. But your brain's working differently then. Your emotions are working differently then. And I think it's like our perception, our ability to perceive and interpret and be in a given moment. Again, it's totally coloring the possibility of our engagement with it. So why I was saying that, other than I think it's interesting, is that when it comes to like the fear of death, well, if I'm not in a particularly good state, it doesn't feel like so much is going to be taken away. Whereas if in a positive, exciting, happier state, I'm like, I wouldn't want this to end. This is awesome. And to be able to see into each state from the other side is difficult for me. I don't know if it is for other people so much, perhaps. Maybe you have a more logical approach to this, that you can see that other state.
I feel like I can, I also feel like I can perceive what it's like not to exist. And I find it terrifying. Well, even though it's technically a paradox.
Yes, it is.
But I feel like I can kind of touch it and know what it's like, in the sense, I don't know how to explain it. It's a cognitive feeling of the absence of feeling and what it means and what it feels like. So I have that to kind of counteract also the fact that I feel this, even at its worst, life is good. It's a weird kind of thing, and there's been times where that has been shaken slightly, I have to say, like throughout my life, but very, very seldomly. I have this sense that just being able to think is a gift, and perceive and experience the universe, regardless of whether it's going well or not for you, is the difference. It's a digital system. It's the difference between 0 and 1. It's not a scale of grays for me. It's off or on. So anything that isn't death is amazing.
And how do you account for being in a bad mood? Like when you are?
But that's part of it.
Okay. And that's still amazing.
It's still amazing.
Okay. I need to try and do some more of this. There's just a bit more of the letter that I wanted to get into. And I see we've already... I'm surprised we've had so much to say, actually, because it's such a short letter. Would you know what makes men greedy for the future? It is because no one has yet found himself. I'm not so sure that I'm greedy for the future. I want that now. I don't want this sort of, at some point I'm sure I'll understand or have found myself or my purpose or whatever. No, I want it now. I don't want it like over the horizon. Fuck that shit. I'm not greedy for the future. I'm greedy for now.
But isn't that being greedy for, like being greedy for the future to happen so that it becomes the now? Isn't that what he's saying?
Maybe. Maybe, and yet when it says future, it makes me think about what's to come, what's to come, what's to come. It's not about what's to come and what's tomorrow. To me, it's like, what is the future that the future that I am going to create is now.
Yeah, but dissatisfaction with your current amount of what is available in your now and wishing for it to come from the future into the now is being
I don't think
greedy for
anything
the
comes
future.
from the future into the now. The now creates the future.
Sure.
So, okay, maybe my point wasn't as clever as I thought.
No, I guess it depends on what he thought. Like how he saw that point. If he sees it the way that I'm thinking about it, then maybe it's not quite the same thing. But if you're right in the way that he's saying it, then yes. I don't know. I don't know what Seneca meant.
Well, in terms of what that future is going to be, he lays into parents, which is quite fun. It's like, your parents, to be sure, asked other blessings for you, this future, whatever it is. But I myself pray rather that you may despise all those things which your parents wished for you in abundance. Their prayers plunder many another person, simply that you may be enriched. Whatever they make over to you must be removed from someone else. Well, I don't agree. It sounds very scarcity-minded, as though just because your parents wished you success means they're kind of indirectly robbing somebody else of success. There's no space there for like mutual enrichment. But what I do think is relevant here and important is not to think that you should want or pursue the things that your parents wanted for you. And I think that's one of the biggest traps that we all fall into, that our sense of what life is and what a good life is, what a good outcome is so inevitably conditioned by our parents and the community that we grow up in. And just replicating that model is often to replicate them or to live the life that they didn't. They're like, if only I had done this, so I want my children to do that. Well, that's not your life. And even if their wishes for you come from this beautiful place of love and care, of wanting the best for you, that's their idea of what the best for you is. It's not necessarily your life.
I mean, ultimately you have sovereignty over your destiny, but I like the idea of a legacy. I will try to, not force, but I will look for an heir amongst my children to continue my mission should I not be able to be immortal. I'll be like, this is where we want to be in 1,000 years from now, so make sure you teach your kid this, and this. And if none of my children decide to take that up, I will look for a ward outside of my own biological.
Very well. I think there's a difference between go and live the life I didn't because I'm frustrated, so much as being able, if you are able to convince, especially if this is a kind of mission which has value that can appeal to more than just you, to be able to convince anyone else, your child, of it, implies, I think, that they must have a certain amount of critical ability. You need to win them over to be able to do it. Not just do it because it's what we've always done and that's tradition, but be able to say, don't you think this would be amazing to pursue this, to do that? And if they buy into it, then that's a good vote in favor of whatever that mission or legacy actually is. But I don't think, would you really want an heir who was only pursuing it out of a blind sense of duty to you rather than because they actually lived and breathed what that mission was?
No, I want them to have a sense of duty to the mission, not to me.
But I think that's where things go wrong when parents say, this is what the future ought to be. That it tends to be based on a sense of obligation to the parents rather than obligation to the mission.
I think ultimately you can be flexible. It all depends what you're trying to build, but like you don't have to structure them too much. You can be like, do your own thing, but within the parameters of trying to achieve this for your children, their children, and their children. So I would encourage every kind of descendant of mine to be an entrepreneur. Now they can take the family fortune and, go from biotech to farming if they want, but be an entrepreneur, be an owner, be a creator, make things happen, innovate. It doesn't matter in what field, whatever you like, but don't go and be a specific role. You can do whatever it is that you're interested in within the realm of being a creator.
Be the Elon of the situation.
Yeah. So instead of going and being a mechanic for Mercedes, be Elon Musk and create Tesla.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that. He's in automotive industry now.
You're going to have to try and not turn that into enormous pressure, though, which will be resented, especially if they're your kids. They'll be, fuck you, don't tell me what to do. It's difficult. I think that was one of the main things you need to do in the same way you might try and convince anyone of anything, is to show what your example is so that they want to follow you.
Yeah. It's lead by example, lead from the front. You know, they should be like, I want to continue your work, as opposed to like, do this. No.
It's like there's quite a lot now, third generation WWE wrestlers. And I don't think that's because they were told that they should do it. It's more that it was an option on their map of possibilities because they'd been around the industry. They'd seen it. They understood some of it. Yeah, it did give them an opening, and, you know, good for them, but they had to decide to walk through it. It wasn't because they were told you should be this. It was like, you could be this. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, you can go and make a life through that because there was some possibility. The end of the letter is kind of vague, but I like a bit of it, which is, I pray that you may get such control over yourself that your mind, now shaken by wandering thoughts, may at last come to rest and be steadfast, that it may be content with itself, and, having attained an understanding of what things are truly good, and that they are in our possession as soon as we have this knowledge. Steadfastness, knowing that you're pursuing your mission, and your mission being what you think is important. Aubrey Marcus talks about this quite a lot. Knowing that you are on the path, you know, under your guiding principle, can bring a lot of harmony and focus to everything. And knowing, like, whatever is happening, being able to understand it through the lens of that North Star, I think is quite profound as a feeling to have.
It is, but it's also an illusion. Like, it doesn't mean you are on the path if you feel that you are. So you have to be cognizant of that. I think it's important.
It depends what your path is. If your path is what sticks out to me is something that Don Howard, the shaman that I worked with in Peru, says. It's all para el bien de todos, for the good of all. That's kind of broad and easy, and it doesn't mean that it's a specific prescriptive path. It's like, is that your activating principle in the way that you want to express yourself into the world? Okay.
That's more vague, so it can be achieved.
Or is it like how we sign off our podcast, be silly, be kind, be weird? Am I holding to those values and principles?
Right. Now I was thinking of more like a path with actual sort of destinations and goals along the way of some kind, as opposed to...
it's more a code.
Okay. Yeah, no, then, okay. Yes.
Okay, tick.
Tick, then.
That was the letter. I feel like it was a bit different, maybe a weird one, but it's fun to mess up the usual schedule.
Yeah. It was quite interesting. And I think also our minds are kind of a little bit funky at the moment, so I think it gave us a bit more of a loose structure, but also
a few things to muse on. As we've been trying to do quite a bunch of things today, everybody, and we've been spending a lot of time in a room with music that we don't like thrumming through the walls.
Yes.
Hopefully you haven't heard any of it.
No, I don't think the microphones will pick it up. We'll see. It'll be interesting. If they do, I will set the supermarket on fire.
Muzak. It's not even music.
Horrible muzak.
Yeah.
It feels like the same 3 chords have been playing for the last 8 hours.
It's not the music of the universe like we were talking about earlier. No. Like, not the eternal no. Mm-mm. It's just bullshit.
I need it to end. Like, that's what my mind wants. It needs it to end. It feels like when there's certain things that feel they feel like they're supposed to ebb or stop, and yet they don't. Like having something stuck in your teeth can feel like that. Like your brain is telling you that needs to stop, that needs to end, fix it. This music feels like a piece of corn stuck in my teeth. It feels like, I don't know. It just
And we're gonna have to do something about it.
It feels like
gonna die.
how I felt when I tried to watch. Is it the Avengers 2, whatever it was called? No, Captain America: Civil War, whilst tripping on LSD, and it felt like the most interminable thing ever. I wanted it to end. I couldn't stop watching, but it needed to, like, I just had this like yearning for it to stop.
And how many years did that last?
It just felt like an eternity.
Okay, not a film that was on my hit list anyway. Thanks for listening, everyone. Like I said, hit us up with your questions. And if you have suggestions of how to burn a supermarket to the ground that you're currently sitting over without harming yourself,
Please let us know.
We'd love to hear. And in the meantime, please be silly, be kind, and be weird.